The final boss of Medarot Girls Mission, making her official grand and divine debut into the mainstream Medarot titles, it is GDS01 Artemis, with a kit of Rebirth, Laser, Guard 500, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Super Armor, which grants passive immunity from paralyzed ailments. This includes Shock, Freeze, and I believe Tornado also is included in that batch, a set number of times relative to the part rank. Now, like I said, it is nice to see this final boss get a chance of the limelight and make her official debut into the mainstream titles. And with that, she does have a rather interesting kit right at first glance, but she does actually pack some really nice stats across the board too. Nearly 4,000 HP for the head, about almost 3,500 HP for her laser arm, almost 5,100 HP for her shield arm, and almost 4,600 HP for the legs. So she can absolutely take a hit and keep on kicking for sure. Rebirth, of course, is a skill that basically means that any ally that has fallen on the field and shut down, Artemis is able to completely resurrect them and restore them back to operating service, of course at 10% HP to all parts restored. Laser, of course, is a Metaforce-reliant optic-based shooting attack that gets a times 1.5 damage bonus at 30% charge and times 2 bonus at 100% charge. Guard 500 is a simple defense skill, as basically it will set the bot on defense stance on the center of the line and intercept any and all blows that are incoming towards any particular ally on the field. However, this also means that any blow that is incoming, Artemis will take the damage for, minus the 500, essentially cut right off the top. So in early game, honestly, well, before I get to that, Guards in general, I have kind of mixed opinions on, if I'm completely honest. If it's something like shoot guard, melee guard, or even counter or mirror, if I want to include those two, those are absolute must-haves to have raised or make use of on just about any kind of build if you need a shielder or defender. Unfortunately, however, anything that is essentially like guard, basic guard, guard 300, guard 500, in early game, you could probably make use of them decently well, as you really aren't dealing a lot of damage that the 5 or 300 actually will cut down relatively decently, but in closer to endgame or even metagame, if you're a competitive player, this 300 or 500 really isn't gonna do diddly squat. Unfortunately, it is nice to have in early game, but in late game, unfortunately, you will not see overall valid use of it for the most part. However, in Artemis's case, she does kind of take that in stride and kind of make use uses it to her advantage. If you take a look at her leg stats across the board, as I mentioned, almost 4,600 HP for the legs. She's also sporting almost 900 mobility on those legs as well, which means she's not only a float leg, which has A rank terrain across the board, S of course on Cyber. She also is yet another fast hover leg, which already puts her in a relatively high bracket of bots or parts that are absolute must-haves. She also has a really high evade stat at nearly 1,400, but the one thing that particularly stands out to me is the fact that her shoot and melee resist stats also are more or less on equal terms to that of a tank leg. You don't normally see stat resists like these, especially on the same part, no less, on anything other than tank. So seeing it on a float leg is really nice. So if you take that, for instance, melee resist of about 1337, and then pile it on with the guard 500 of the arm, you could probably make use of that decently well. And even if you're still going to end up tanking the full blow, that minus 500 and the melee resist on top of that will probably reduce damage more so than I am originally anticipating. And if in that case, I will easily take back what I said and more or less kind of, or maybe renegotiate my judgment on it just a little bit. As a pure set score, I would definitely rate Artemis probably not super high, but at least in a kind of like a mixed balance range, I suppose, as a 6.5 out of 10. At first glance, and as I look back on this, Rebirth, Laser, and Guard 500 means that she is not going to be an offense fighter in any sense of the term. She has one move that's capable of it, but it is also Metaforce reliant. But this also is kind of a detriment to her because none of her parts have any kind of Metaforce sustain built in. So she will be kind of hurting for that overall damage unless you can buy her time to charge for it. But she does kind of have that mixed utility feel to it. So you can use her essentially as a shielder for the first couple turns if you wish. Maybe use her for passive Rebirth to revive any lost allies should it happen. And then maybe if you do end end up having to make use of a long-range skill for offense, you do have it at your disposal. However, as mixed parts, I would rate her significantly higher at a 7.5, maybe even an 8 out of 10 in some cases, because the parts by themselves as a pure set maybe won't meld together very nicely, but as mixed parts, you can make use of them a lot easier. Laser, of course, you can fit in just about anywhere, and with that base power of 1735, you can make use of it pretty easily if you can pile it up with a good part, say like for instance Full Charge or Charge Plant or a Hunter or Sniper nature base metal to make use of. Or the legs, absolutely you can make use of on any kind of model, especially the female base for mono-female teams that need a fast float leg that can get them to and from, in addition to the super armor which grants them immunity from certain kinds of paralyzed ailments.